April 7, 1945. The largest battleship ever constructed steams toward Okinawa on a one-way mission. She carries fuel for a single voyage. No return. Her name, Yamato, and she's about to face 400 American aircraft alone. Welcome to Mr. Torque Official, where we explore powerful ships through deep research, real history, and clear storytelling, from their creation to their final fate. Yamato was not just a battleship. She was a statement wrapped in 72,000 tons of steel. Built in absolute secrecy during the late 1930s, Yamato represented Japan's answer to an impossible question: how do you defeat an enemy with greater industrial power and more ships? Japan's answer was brutal and simple: build battleships so massive, so heavily armed, and so impenetrable that nothing afloat could match them. Yamato and her sister ship Musashi were the largest battleships ever built. Their 18.1-inch guns were the biggest ever mounted on a warship. Their armor was thicker than any ship before or since. When Yamato entered service in December 1941, she was the most powerful surface combatant on Earth. But this is a story of tragic irony. Yamato was built to dominate in battleship versus battleship combat. Yet by the time she was completed, that era was already ending. Aircraft carriers would decide the Pacific War. Yamato would spend most of the war at anchor, her guns silent, her potential wasted. And when she finally sailed into battle, it would not be to win, but to die with honor. Japan was an island nation dependent on imports of oil, steel, and raw materials. Control of the sea wasn't optional, it was survival. But there was one massive problem: the United States. American industrial capacity dwarfed Japan's. The U.S. could build more ships, faster, and replace losses that would cripple Japan permanently. Japanese naval planners understood that in a prolonged war, America would win. The only path to victory was a short, decisive war where Japan's superior ships could annihilate the American fleet in one climactic battle. This was the decisive battle doctrine: lure the U.S. Navy into the Western Pacific and destroy it in a single engagement. It was a plan built on one assumption: that battleships would decide the war. Japan committed massive resources to building ships that could destroy any American battleship in combat. Yamato was the ultimate expression of this philosophy. But the assumption was already outdated. Japan built Yamato to win the last war, not the next one. After World War I, the Washington Naval Treaty limited battleship sizes to prevent an arms race. This locked Japan into permanent naval inferiority. The treaty allowed the U.S. and Britain larger fleets than Japan. By the mid-1930s, Japan withdrew from the treaty entirely, freeing itself from all restrictions. Japanese naval architects received a clear mandate: design a battleship that could defeat any two enemy battleships simultaneously. The result was Yamato, a ship so large and powerful it would render all existing battleships obsolete. If Japan couldn't match America in numbers, they would surpass them in quality. But there was a darker purpose. By the late 1930s, war with the United States seemed inevitable. Japan needed a weapon that could deliver a knockout blow in a single decisive battle. Yamato was designed to be that weapon. Her guns could outrange American battleships. Her armor could withstand their shells. In theory, Yamato was invincible. In reality, she would never get the chance to prove it. Yamato pushed naval engineering to absolute limits. Japanese designers faced three massive challenges. First, the guns. Japan wanted weapons that could outrange and outgun any enemy. The solution was the 18.1-inch naval rifle, the largest guns ever mounted on a warship. These guns fired 3,219-pound armor-piercing shells over 26 miles. The turrets alone weighed over 2,700 tons each, more than an entire destroyer. The recoil forces were so extreme the entire ship's structure had to be reinforced. Second, the armor. Yamato needed to survive hits from the largest enemy shells while remaining mobile. The main armor belt was over 16 inches thick, thicker than any battleship before or since. Deck armor protected against plunging fire and aerial bombs. Internal compartmentalization limited flooding. Yamato was designed to keep fighting even after catastrophic damage. Third, the size. Yamato was so massive Japan had to deepen the docks at Kure Naval Arsenal just to build her. Her dimensions were classified as a state secret. Workers weren't told full specifications. Aerial photos were forbidden. Camouflage netting covered the shipyard during construction. Japanese engineers succeeded in creating a masterpiece. Yamato wasn't just large. She was balanced, stable, designed to survive punishment that would sink anything else afloat. But all this power came at a cost Japan couldn't afford. Construction began in November 1937 at Kure Naval Arsenal. From day one, absolute secrecy. The entire shipyard was covered with massive camouflage nets to prevent aerial observation. Workers were forbidden from discussing the project. Misinformation was spread deliberately. Official documents listed Yamato as much smaller to mislead spies. Thousands of workers labored around the clock. Every component was custom-made. Nothing of this size had been attempted before. The propulsion system, 12 boilers driving 4 steam turbines, was designed to push over 70,000 tons through water at speeds exceeding 27 knots. Yamato was launched August 8, 1940. Even then, her true size was hidden. Press coverage was minimal, photographs controlled. After launch, fitting out continued for over a year as weapons and electronics were installed. On December 16, 1941, 9 days after Pearl Harbor, Yamato was commissioned. She entered service as the most powerful battleship in the world. American intelligence wouldn't confirm her specifications until after the war. But by the time Yamato was ready, the world had changed. Pearl Harbor proved aircraft carriers, not battleships, would dominate the Pacific. Building Yamato cost approximately 250 million yen at 1940s prices, billions in today's money. But the real cost went beyond currency. Yamato required massive quantities of high-grade steel that could have built cruisers, destroyers, carriers, or merchant ships. Tens of thousands of tons of armor plate, specialized alloys, advanced machinery. Entire factories dedicated to producing components. Skilled engineers and technicians tied to the project for years. Japan justified this by believing one Yamato could destroy multiple enemy battleships. But this logic depended on Yamato actually getting into combat. As the war progressed, battleship versus battleship engagements became increasingly rare. The resources spent on Yamato had strategic consequences. Japan entered World War II with fewer carriers than the US. Had Japan invested Yamato's steel and labor into additional carriers and aircraft, the Pacific War might have unfolded differently. Instead, Japan built the most powerful battleship ever constructed, and then struggled to find a use for it. Yamato was a ship of superlatives. She measured 263 meters in length with a beam of 38.9 meters. Full load displacement, 72,000 tons, the heaviest battleship ever built. American Iowa-class battleships displaced 57,000 tons. Yamato was in a different category entirely. Powered by 12 Campon boilers and 4 steam turbines generating 150,000 shaft horsepower, Yamato reached 27 knots, impressive for her size, though slower than Iowa-class ships at 33 knots. Range: over 7,200 nautical miles at 16 knots. Crew: approximately 2,750 officers and men. Main armament: 9 18.1-inch guns and 3 triple turrets. These guns fired 3,219-pound shells over 26 miles. A single broadside represented nearly 30,000 pounds of explosive force. The recoil was so intense the entire ship shifted in the water. Secondary armament: 12 6.1-inch guns to engage cruisers and destroyers. Anti-aircraft: initially 12 5-inch guns and 24 25mm guns. By 1945, over 150 AA guns of various calibers, a desperate response to overwhelming American air power. Armor: main belt 16.1 inches thick. Deck armor up to 9.1 inches. Turret faces 25.6 inches, the thickest armor ever installed on a warship. underwater torpedo defense with multiple watertight compartments. In theory, nearly unsinkable. Despite being the world's most powerful battleship, Yamato spent the war's first years largely inactive. This period became mockingly known as Hotel Yamato. The ship spent more time at anchor than in combat. Japanese command was unwilling to risk Yamato in anything less than a decisive engagement. She was too valuable, too symbolic to lose in a minor skirmish. Japan also faced critical fuel shortages. Operating Yamato required enormous fuel, and as American submarines cut supply lines, there wasn't enough oil for extended operations. Most importantly, the Pacific War didn't favor battleships. Battles like Coral Sea and Midway were decided by aircraft at ranges far beyond battleship guns. Yamato's massive weapons, the very reason she was built, were largely irrelevant. Yamato participated in the Midway operation in June 1942, but never got close enough to engage American ships. After Japan's devastating defeat, she returned to port, guns unfired. Throughout 1942 and 1943, Yamato occasionally sortied but saw little action. She served primarily as a flagship, a floating command center rather than a combat vessel. Frustration grew among the crew who trained to fight, but spent their days on routine drills. The Hotel Yamato period revealed a harsh truth. Japan had built the ultimate battleship for a war that was no longer being fought. Yamato's power was theoretical. Her guns were silent. And as Japan's position deteriorated, it became clear the decisive battle she was designed for would never happen, or would come too late to matter. By mid-1944, Yamato had been in service nearly 3 years. Her 18.1-inch guns had barely fired in combat. The ship built to dominate the seas sat idle while Japan's empire crumbled. Island after island fell. Carrier after carrier was lost. The decisive battle never came. But the sleeping giant would not sleep forever. As American forces closed on the Philippines and Okinawa, Japan's desperate situation would finally force Yamato into action. The battles ahead would test everything: her armor, her guns, her crew, her purpose. The question was no longer whether Yamato would fight. It was whether the greatest battleship ever built could change the outcome of a war already lost. The final battle is coming. And for Yamato, there will be no return. Part 2 will reveal Yamato's combat debut at Leyte Gulf and the final suicide mission that would send her and 3,000 men to the bottom of the Pacific.